Translate this, and my fortune will be yours," mocked the millionaire, waving a sleek, cream-colored catalog in the air, his voice dripping with arrogance. The room erupted in soft, restrained chuckles, not because the joke was funny, but because it came from him. Powerful. Untouchable. He was the kind of man people laughed with even when it hurt. And it hurt. The words, the tone, the smug little smirk. It hurt because it wasn't just about the catalog or the language. It was about her, standing in front of a room full of white collars and black ties, painted walls and million-dollar sculptures, being turned into a moment of entertainment. He didn't ask her to translate because he thought she might know. He asked because he was sure she didn't. She looked like the only one who didn't belong. Young, black, quiet. And she had the nerve to stand near the table reserved for investors, holding a notepad, wearing shoes that had no designer name. The room smelled of fine wine and polished dominance. And she smelled like someone who fought for the right to be there. And he didn't like that. He waved the catalog again, this time pointing to the section written entirely in Korean, a nod to the high-profile Korean buyers expected to bid on a rare ceramic piece from the Joseon dynasty. "Come on," he laughed, eyes scanning the crowd like he was offering them a show. "You standing over there like you got something to say. Let's see if you can even read this. Translate it. Just this paragraph. And hey, if you get it right, I'll give you my fortune." He winked dramatically and tossed the book toward her. "But you don't even know what language it is." The catalog thudded on the floor at her feet. No one moved. Even the servers paused. Her cheeks burned, not from embarrassment, but from that special kind of fury only people who've had to earn every inch of their presence know too well. Her mind screamed every memory, every hallway she walked through pretending not to hear the whispers, every meeting she entered where no one looked her in the eyes, every application that was impressive. And now, here she was, turned into a joke in a room she had spent her life trying to reach. But she didn't bend. She didn't crack. She picked up the catalog slowly, flipped to the page, and stared at it, not in confusion, but in complete, calculated silence. Everyone watched, waiting, hoping, maybe, that she would try and fail. What he didn't know, was that the entire paragraph was already memorized in her head. Not because she had studied it, not because she had practiced, but because she had written it. Every word, every phrase, every cultural nuance. She was the reason that catalog existed. She was the mind behind the translation, the invisible hands that shaped the very thing being used to mock her. But she said nothing. Not yet. Because sometimes silence holds more power than rage. And what he didn't realize is that mocking her that night wouldn't just cost him his dignity. It would cost him everything. He had no idea that 2 years earlier, he had tried to acquire a small AI translation startup, a tool praised for its remarkable precision in Korean English nuance, a system so seamless it beat every industry standard. He had offered to buy it. He had called the creator ambitious but unproven. He had offered scraps. She had refused. Quietly, firmly. And he had laughed. Tonight, the same tool was quietly embedded in the company he was mocking. He didn't know. No one did. Because her name had never been printed. Her face never shown. But her mind, her mind was in every sentence of that catalog. The humbling wouldn't come in a slap. It wouldn't come in a scream. It would come in the slow, surgical way truth always finds the arrogant. With witnesses. With silence. With undeniable receipts. But back in that moment, none of that was visible. All they saw was a girl in a room full of power, being mocked for sport. He had the mic. He had the crowd. He had the money. And the audience had already decided she would fail. Because in rooms like that, people don't wait for evidence. They look for comfort. And it's always more comfortable to believe the powerful are right. "Didn't think so," he said, starting to turn away, dismissing her like a spilled drink. And then she spoke. Fluent. Clear. Sharp. The room froze. Not just because she translated the paragraph, but because she added a correction to a cultural idiom that had been misused. Her voice was steady. Her tone dry, surgical, almost bored. As if she were correcting a child. And suddenly, laughter evaporated. The wine didn't taste as sweet. The lights didn't feel as warm. He turned back, trying to keep the smile on his face, but it cracked. For the first time, he looked at her not as a joke, but as a threat. And that was just the beginning. Because she wasn't there to prove anything to him. She was there to take something back. What would you do if the very person who mocked your intelligence ended up depending on the thing they mocked you for? And more importantly, what if they already did and never knew? Stay with us. You won't believe who she really is. At Tales of Twist, we stand firmly against any form of racism, discrimination, or prejudice. We believe in dignity, opportunity, and justice for every Black individual, in every space. This story, like many others we tell, is a reminder that silence never wins, but strength, resilience, and truth always rise. You matter. Your story matters. And you deserve to be seen. Now enjoy the journey. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit subscribe and stay with us for more. The auction house sat in the heart of Santa Fe, New Mexico, nestled between adobe walls and sandstone walkways, where money whispered instead of shouted, and everything from the wine to the lighting was designed to remind you of your place. It wasn't flashy like New York or cold like Chicago. It was refined, the kind of space that made you feel like a stranger if you couldn't name-drop an artist or trace your family wealth back 3 generations. On that particular evening, under golden chandeliers and curated silence, the room swelled with collectors, CEOs, and silent partners, all dressed in tailored expectation. It was the kind of place where power didn't need to speak loudly. It simply entered the room and waited to be noticed. And standing just barely at the edge of that world, holding a leather-bound notepad pressed to her chest, was Nia Robinson, 25, observant, and painfully aware that her presence was tolerated, not welcomed. Nia had never wanted to fit into a room like that. She had only ever wanted to create something that mattered. Raised in a small apartment on the south side of Dallas by her grandmother, a retired school librarian who still corrected grammar mid-hug, Nia had grown up surrounded by words, books, and voices from distant lands. Korean had come into her life by accident, through a worn copy of a poetry anthology that her grandmother rescued from a library discard pile. She didn't speak the language then, but something about the structure, the rhythm, pulled at her. She wanted to understand it, not for school, not for points, but because it was beautiful. That desire became obsession. That obsession became skill. And before she knew it, the girl who couldn't afford a laptop was spending every free hour in public libraries, teaching herself languages through apps, books, audio recordings, anything she could get her hands on. Korean was her first. Japanese followed. Then Mandarin. And eventually, the idea came, not just to learn, but to build. By the time Nia graduated high school, she had already started coding. Nothing fancy at first. Basic interfaces, widgets, plugins. But her brain worked like a bridge between words and logic. She didn't just understand language. She understood how to make machines understand it too. So when she got to the University of Texas on a full-ride STEM scholarship, she went in quiet but burning. The translation app came during her second year, born out of frustration from poorly translated materials and an unfair grade from a professor who accused her of using fake sources. She didn't complain. She didn't fight. She built. The app started small, just Korean English at first, with an emphasis on cultural idioms and tonal context. But it worked. Too well. She submitted it to a student tech competition, and within weeks, her inbox exploded. Professors wanted to study it. Startups wanted to buy it. Venture capitalists wanted to talk. But Nia didn't want to sell. Not yet. She wasn't done. She wasn't finished proving, not to the world, but to herself, that she could build something complete, something big, and keep it. That's when the offer came in. An unnamed party. A ridiculous buyout number. No attribution. No seat at the table. Just a lump sum and a signature. She declined. Politely. Quietly. Without fanfare. But it stayed with her. That faceless attempt to buy her silence. So when she moved to Santa Fe after graduation, it wasn't for the lights or the lifestyle. It was for the data. The city was quietly becoming a hub for East Asian art dealers, many of whom preferred to do business in Korean. She took a job at a small, family-run art translation studio. Underpaid, overqualified, and completely invisible. She didn't care. The work gave her access to catalogs, communications, expressions. It gave her context. And every night, she worked on the app. Alone. Quietly. Without anyone knowing her name. Until one day, her boss handed her a project that changed everything. A full translation of a high-profile catalog for an elite private auction, hosted by a billionaire named Richard Langford. He was infamous in tech circles, not for brilliance, but for brutality. He bought companies cheap, gutted them, sold what was left. He had a record of making things his. And apparently, he had taken an interest in East Asian art. Nia did the job. Perfectly. She stayed up 3 nights in a row, making sure every phrase was culturally respectful, every idiom accurate, every page spotless. She wasn't credited. Of course not. But she knew her work. She felt it. She printed a copy of the final catalog and tucked it away in her drawer, a trophy that no one would ever see. She hadn't expected to be invited to the event. But her boss, impressed with her fluency, insisted she attend as a liaison, just in case something got lost in translation. "You deserve to be in that room," he said. Nia wasn't so sure. But she went anyway, dressed in her best blazer, which still didn't quite fit. Hair braided neatly back. Shoes that pinched her toes. She stood quietly near the back, listening more than speaking, observing the way people moved, how they shook hands, how they avoided eye contact with staff. She saw the Korean investors enter, sharp and composed. She heard whispers about their spending power. And then Richard Langford walked in. He didn't need to introduce himself. Everyone turned. He moved like someone who had decided long ago that the world owed him applause. Tall, tan from golf, teeth too white, watch too shiny. He didn't look at Nia. Not at first. Not even when she greeted the Korean guests in their language and helped them to their seats. Not even when she corrected the pronunciation of a title one of the staff butchered. But then someone mentioned the girl who spoke Korean. And he looked, and something flickered in his expression, a mix of amusement and something sharper. He approached her halfway through the event, during a break in bidding. He held a glass of champagne, smirk in full bloom. Asked her if she was enjoying the view. She said yes. He asked where she studied. She told him. He raised an eyebrow. Full ride. She nodded. Figures. He glanced at the catalog in his hand, flipping to a page at random, one she had translated. He held it out, just slightly away from her. "You know what this says?" he asked, voice low but condescending. She responded simply, "Yes, I do." That's when he said it. That line. That challenge. That moment. "Translate this, and my fortune will be yours." The words hung in the air, absurd and cruel. People laughed. Some nervously. Others genuinely. Because to them, it was a game. A powerful man teasing a nobody. A girl whose shoes didn't match her earrings. A girl who clearly didn't belong. But Nia didn't laugh. Not because she was embarrassed, but because she recognized him. Not just from headlines, but from the offer. The buyout. The arrogance. The belief that brilliance only mattered if it came with a title or a tuxedo. He didn't know who she was. But she knew exactly who he was. And she knew what was coming. Because the real story, the one that no one in that room could see, hadn't started with his mockery. It had started long before, in a bedroom with second-hand books and borrowed Wi-Fi, with a girl who believed that the best revenge wasn't loud. It was undeniable. The only question now was how long it would take before he realized who was really holding the fortune. The morning after the auction, the city felt quieter than usual. The soft hum of traffic drifted through the adobe corridors of Santa Fe, but inside Langford and Wells headquarters, the air was sharp and uneasy. Tension was a subtle undercurrent, hidden beneath press suits and polished conference tables, but it was there, vibrating just under the surface. Everyone moved with more caution. Smiles didn't stretch as wide. The staff had noticed, even if they didn't say it out loud. Something had shifted. Something had cracked. Richard Langford stood at the head of the main boardroom, arms folded, eyes locked on the large monitor at the far end of the room. A video was playing. A clip from the auction. The moment. His moment. Only now it wasn't funny. It wasn't charming. The soundbite, "Translate this and my fortune will be yours," played over and over, pulled out of context and passed around the internet like a warning label. Underneath the video, there were thousands of comments. Not all were outraged, but enough of them hit a nerve. They called it what it was: humiliation, arrogance, racism. And worse, the Korean investors, the ones who traveled across the world to consider a partnership, had gone silent since the event. Phones weren't being answered. Emails returned unread. Richard had built his empire off of confidence, but now even his own board members weren't sure what they were defending. He turned the screen off with a flick of the remote and exhaled through his nose. "That girl," he muttered. "She sabotaged the damn event. Made me look like a fool in front of our biggest prospects." His voice wasn't angry. It was offended, like a man appalled that his reality had been altered without permission. "She planned it. All of it. No one just walks into a room like that and makes me look that small." Across the table, his assistant cleared her throat cautiously. "Her name's Nia Robinson," she said, tapping a folder in front of her. "We found her resume. She worked for the translation studio that handled the catalog. Graduated from UT, full scholarship. Multilingual. Built an AI project in college that won national awards, apparently." Richard squinted. "Why wasn't I told that before the event?" "She was listed as a junior translator, not even credited in the final version." A short silence followed. Then Richard chuckled, low, bitter. "So she was nobody." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, there's more." He looked up. "She owns LinguaCode." That stopped him. She repeated it, slower this time, as if it might hit differently with weight. "She's the registered founder and CEO of LinguaCode." Richard's jaw tightened. He leaned back, silent for a moment, eyes locked on the polished wood of the table. LinguaCode was a name he hadn't heard in a year, not since one of his acquisition managers tried to buy out a small AI translation app for dirt cheap and was turned down. The app had gone quiet after that. No press, no relaunch, no news. He'd assumed it died quietly like most passion projects do. But now, that same ghost was sitting at the core of his company's most lucrative deal. The catalog, the translations, the negotiations with the Korean buyers. All of it had been handled by that system, through an outsourced licensing arrangement his team hadn't even realized was using proprietary AI. "So let me get this straight," he said, voice icy. "The app we tried to buy for peanuts, the one I was told had no scalability, no infrastructure, no founder with vision, that app just burned a hole through my biggest international deal." The assistant didn't answer. She didn't need to. Richard stood. His posture was stiff. "Get her here." "She doesn't work here." "I don't care. Find her." He didn't ask nicely. He didn't consider a meeting or a phone call. He wanted control back, and he wanted it now. By the time Nia entered the building 3 hours later, the weight in the air was different. She wasn't led in like an intern or treated like a mistake to be corrected. She was escorted, wordlessly, by security. Her walk through the marble lobby to the top-floor conference suite felt like a movie played in reverse. The same space that once felt untouchable now looked like scaffolding ready to collapse. But Nia wasn't angry. She was calm. Because she wasn't coming for a confrontation. She was coming for closure. Richard was already seated when she entered. He didn't stand, just watched her. She didn't smile. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." She did, silently. He leaned forward. "You made a scene." "I corrected you," she replied. He ignored that. "The Korean buyers pulled out this morning. They said the deal felt unstable. That your outburst was a sign of deeper issues. You cost me millions. I wasn't part of your company. Your actions did that, not mine." Richard smirked, but there was no humor in it. "You built LinguaCode." "Yes. We tried to buy it. You said no." "I did. And then you used it to get back at me." Nia tilted her head slightly. "I used it to do the job I was paid for. You turned that into a performance." He stood suddenly, pacing. "You don't get it, do you? This world doesn't work the way you think it does. It's not about who's right. It's about who holds the mic. She stayed seated, her voice even. Maybe. But these days, microphones are everywhere. He paused, turning to face her fully. So what do you want? Huh? Is this about money now? You want me to make you an offer again? Fine. Let's do it. I'm not here to sell anything. Then what? She met his gaze with steady eyes. I'm here to watch you realize that you needed me the entire time. That the tool you dismissed? It already saved your company. That the language you mocked is the reason you even had a shot at that deal. I came to remind you that power doesn't always look like you think it does. Silence stretched long between them. Finally, he broke it, voice low, bitter. You want to teach me a lesson? No, she said. You're not the lesson. You're the proof. He stared at her, something fragile flickering beneath his pride. She stood, gathering her things. One more thing, she added before turning toward the door. I licensed LinguaCode to 3 of your competitors this quarter. They all knew what they were buying. His face twitched. She gave the smallest smile. Good luck in your next board meeting. And then she walked out. She didn't need applause. She didn't need revenge. She had the truth. And the truth, when held by someone who knows their worth, is the loudest silence of all. 3 months later, the name LinguaCode wasn't just respected in tech circles. It was unavoidable. Articles flooded business publications, headlined with phrases like the black woman behind the translation empire, and the deal that changed language tech forever. Nia never sought the spotlight, but the spotlight found her anyway. What began as a necessity, a quiet tool built in borrowed hours, had grown into a movement. Schools started reaching out, asking to implement LinguaCode into their language programs. Investors who once ignored her now chased her. And major corporations, including the very same ones who had partnered with Langford & Wells, were signing exclusive licensing deals with Nia directly, cutting out the middleman. Not out of pity, not to look good, but because her tech worked, because her vision had value, and because she held the one thing people in power underestimated the most, ownership. Meanwhile, Richard Langford's empire was unraveling, not in a dramatic fall from grace, but in a series of steady, public failures. First came the board vote. Not a full removal, not yet, but enough pressure to strip him of decision-making authority. Then came the exit of key partners, spooked by his public humiliation and growing online backlash. The Korean investors didn't just pull out of the auction. They announced a new strategic alliance with one of Langford's biggest competitors, one now powered by LinguaCode. Legal quietly began looking into ethics violations after the auction incident went viral, with some suggesting insider bias and discriminatory behavior in hiring practices. Employees who had once smiled politely at his comments began forwarding emails to HR. His image, once sleek and untouchable, became a case study in arrogance. But perhaps the most unexpected blow came when his own daughter, a quiet board observer with a stake in the company, made a public statement, praising Nia's innovation, condemning the auction incident, and announcing her own resignation in favor of joining a new advisory team for LinguaCode. The news exploded across platforms. In one post she wrote, "I'd rather help build the future than protect a past that no longer reflects our values." For the first time in his career, Richard faced consequences that couldn't be bought off or buried. And it wasn't just about a single moment. It was about what that moment revealed. People didn't turn on him because of the sentence he spoke. They turned because, deep down, they recognized something too familiar in it. The cruelty, the dismissal, the assumption that brilliance couldn't possibly live inside someone who didn't look the part. Nia didn't gloat. She didn't post. She didn't seek headlines. She worked. She led. She hired young women and men who looked like her, spoke like her, came from overlooked neighborhoods just like the one she grew up in. She created internship pipelines that paid well, offered mentorship, and refused to tokenize anyone. She stood on stages she once only dreamed of, not to show off, but to open doors behind her. One night, during a keynote at a global tech summit, she paused mid-sentence, looked at the crowd, and smiled. "I used to think silence was survival," she said. "Now I know. Using your voice isn't a risk. Letting someone else define your value is. The applause was immediate, but she didn't stay to soak it in. She had meetings, ideas, people to empower. As for Richard, he disappeared from headlines over time, not because he was redeemed, but because he was replaced. That's how legacy works when built on sand. He still lived comfortably, but no one called him a visionary anymore. His speeches stopped trending. His name no longer opened the right doors. And worst of all, he knew why. He knew who. And he knew it wasn't luck. It was the result of every door he tried to close, and one woman who walked through anyway. And that's the heart of this story, isn't it? Not revenge, not even justice, but clarity. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't clap back or tear someone down. It's to keep building, knowing full well that your existence already challenges the system they're trying to protect. It's about showing up, not as what they expect, but as who you are, fully, unapologetically, quietly brilliant. So if you're listening to this right now and you've ever been underestimated, ever been told you were too much, too little, too loud, too soft, too black, too foreign, too not a fit, let this story remind you. They don't get to decide who you become. Your brilliance doesn't need permission. It only needs persistence. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a room where your worth was questioned before you even spoke? Have you ever had to swallow your pride while knowing deep down you had more to offer than anyone in the room? Tell us in the comments. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And someone out there needs to hear it. And if you felt something listening to this story, if it lit a fire, if it gave you hope, if it reminded you of your own journey, don't leave without subscribing to Tales of Twist. This is where stories flip, where the underestimated rise, and where truth always finds its voice. We'll see you in the next one.